Hey guys, it's Chris. From a couple who survived multiple natural disasters to the poor guy eaten by a shark on his newlywed vacation. Here are 11 wild times when honeymoons went wrong. Number 11. Ziplining disaster. You might think that traveling to an exotic tropical location and doing some fun activities is a great way to bond on your honeymoon. But actually, you may want to think twice because there is a fine line between danger and adventure. A young couple in their 20s from Israel decided to go on an amazing cruise to the Americas. They were on the Royal Caribbean cruise and went on an excursion in Honduras. The activity of the day was ziplining, advertised as a great way to swoop above exotic plants and beautiful landscapes. The wife was ziplining through the trees when she got stuck in the middle, halfway down the cable, suspended high up in the air. As she was stopped, her husband came gliding down the zipline behind her, slamming into her. It's a little unclear what happened next, but 2 ambulances arrived at the site of the zipline where they carried the tourists out. They suffered numerous injuries and the young man said he couldn't breathe. They were both still conscious when they arrived at the hospital, but later on, the husband was dead. It was an enormous shock, and a representative said he had died of a brain hemorrhage. The wife was transported to a hospital in the United States, where she had to have surgery. What was supposed to be the best time of their lives turned into a complete tragedy. Apparently, it's also not the first time a zipline excursion here has gone wrong. Several tourists have been injured by ziplining. So have you ever done ziplining before? Please let me know in the comments. And if you haven't, it's probably best not to do it on your honeymoon. Number 10. Honeymoon from hell. A couple from Sweden experienced more natural disasters during their honeymoon than most people do throughout their entire lives. Stefan and Erika Svanström were on a romantic honeymoon, along with their very young daughter, when the first disaster struck in Munich, Germany. The couple got stranded because of a snowstorm. When they finally made it to Australia, where they had intended to spend their honeymoon relaxing in the sun, they were hit with a cyclone. They left the city of Cairns fleeing the cyclone and journeyed to Brisbane. Once they got there, that city was hit by a flood. To escape the flood, they headed to Perth. And once there, a series of devastating bushfires caused the skies to turn black. Australia really wasn't shaping up to be a very good honeymoon destination, so the couple went to New Zealand. And upon their arrival, the country was struck by a 6.3 magnitude earthquake, which caused enormous devastation. The couple was sick and tired of suffering disasters, so they went all the way to Japan thinking they'd be safe there. And days later, they were hit by another earthquake on March 11th that devastated the land of the rising sun. And yet amazingly, the couple survived each natural disaster without a single injury, and arrived back home at the end of the ordeal with one amazing story. According to the couple, the insane honeymoon actually strengthened their marriage. Number 9. Nightmare wedding, nightmare honeymoon. Keith and Sharon Clark began their marriage with a very unlucky wedding and went on to have a nightmare of a honeymoon. It all started on their wedding day when they had to be evacuated from their hotel after the ceiling collapsed in a different wedding reception. Right next door to where their wedding was happening, the roof caved in on another wedding party. After narrowly escaping death, the couple went on their honeymoon. It was a sign of things to come, that's for sure, because their honeymoon turned out to be a disaster. They had booked through a tour operator that basically collapsed and went out of business as they embarked on their journey. It meant their money for the honeymoon was gone, and their itinerary was ruined. The couple walked into their hotel in Malta and the receptionist told them that their names were not registered. The tour company had royally screwed them. They were forced to pay for new accommodations, almost doubling what they'd already paid for their honeymoon. In the end, they did get a bit of a vacation, it just cost way more than they could have imagined. Number 8. Newlyweds drown. A couple from New York celebrated their wedding with close friends and family members. What was supposed to be a happy occasion turned into a disaster. 4 days later, while on their honeymoon in the Caribbean, they both drowned. Mohammed Malik and Noor Shah were married on October 24th, and after, they took a plane to Turks and Caicos. On October 28th, they went out for a swim, and according to a statement given by the father of the groom, they were only swimming in water up to their chests when disaster struck. A rip current swooped in and basically scooped the couple out to sea. Rip currents can be extremely deadly, even if you're only swimming near the shore. They were sucked underwater and couldn't reach the surface. At the time rescuers got them back to dry land and performed CPR, they were sadly already dead. It was a huge tragedy for the family, who couldn't believe only 4 days after such a joyous wedding, and while the couple were celebrating what was supposed to be a new life together, they were both taken abruptly. The family held a joint funeral for the deceased, and it was not a pleasant experience for anyone. Number 7. Luxury diarrhea. Michelle Smith and her new husband David had a pretty miserable honeymoon while staying at a luxury holiday resort. Michelle never really saw her husband during their honeymoon because she wasn't stuck in the toilet with debilitating stomach cramps. He was. They had decided to go on their honeymoon in Cape Verde and were staying in what they thought was a luxury accommodation. What they didn't know was that the hotel was in the middle of a horrible outbreak of a mysterious sickness. The guests at the resort were dropping like flies. Within just 24 hours, Michelle was struck by the worst bug she had ever experienced in nearly 50 years on this planet. She spent the entire holiday sick and sweating with crippling diarrhea, and she wasn't the only one. Almost everyone at the hotel was getting sick. And then, just as their honeymoon was coming to an end, David also fell ill and had to fly home feeling like death. Number 6. Exploding ferry. A British couple nearly died while on their honeymoon in Indonesia after the ferry they were riding on exploded in a giant fireball of doom. Ed and Donna were on their second honeymoon, taking a 10-day dream tour across Southeast Asia. What they hadn't expected was for the fuel tank of their ferry to explode. To make matters even worse, the couple was trying to make up for the extremely disappointing honeymoon they had taken the year before when Donna became sick and their trip was ruined. Well, their second honeymoon was even worse. According to the Daily Mail, the couple had been seated directly above the engine when it went off. The floor literally tore open beneath them as water flooded into the boat. They were knocked unconscious in the brutal blast and were among 20 other passengers seriously injured. The boat was right between the tourist islands of Bali and Lombok when the explosion occurred. Lucky for them, the boat didn't sink, and they were taken to the hospital. But believe it or not, they were relatively lucky. Other tourists had gotten set on fire while Ed and Donna only suffered a few breaks and bruises. Number 5. Death in Antigua. In 2008, Ben and Catherine were on their honeymoon in Antigua when the worst possible thing imaginable happened to them. They were staying at the Cocos Hotel when a pair of armed robbers kicked down their door, surprising the couple. Before they even knew what was happening, they were both shot down like dogs. The murderers brutally assassinated the couple, who had gotten married only 2 weeks before. They stole their mobile phones, their digital camera, and what little they had in cash, and then they fled. It was cold, calculated, and a merciless attack just to get a few bucks and some measly cell phones. 3 years later, in 2011, the murderers were sentenced to life in prison. However, the story just keeps getting crazier. The murderers actually escaped from the police, scaling a 30-foot wall at the prison and then jumping over the other side. The police hunted the escaped fugitives down, and in a dramatic confrontation shot one of the murderers to death in the street. Number 4. Florida Keys crash. A pair of newlyweds from North Carolina were on their way to a romantic honeymoon. Unfortunately for them, they never arrived. Driving through the Florida Keys, they drove headfirst into traffic and crashed into a truck and died. Nobody's sure exactly what happened in the moments leading up to the crash. According to the authorities, 30-year-old William Harrell and his 23-year-old wife Blakely veered their Toyota into an oncoming lane and straight into the path of a pickup truck. It was an absolute mess of a crash. There was blood and metal all over the road. It's unknown whether the couple was fooling around and lost control of the vehicle, but something definitely happened. They literally hopped over the yellow line and did a kamikaze, and it's doubtful they did that on purpose. Number 3. Honeymoon shark attack. Ian and Gemma were enjoying a seafood lunch on Preslin Island in the Seychelles. It was sunny, they had just gotten married, and it was shaping up to be the perfect honeymoon. At around 3:30 in the afternoon, one of the proprietors of the seafood restaurant told Gemma that she shouldn't go into the water right now because someone was recently killed by a shark just a few feet from where they were eating. The proprietors warned the couple, don't go into the water or you could be eaten by a shark. Well, guess what those tourists did? They paid their bill, left the restaurant, and walked straight into the water they had just been warned against entering. The proprietors of the restaurant then watched in horror as Ian was almost immediately attacked by a hungry great white shark. The attack only took seconds, and the proprietors of the restaurant watched from less than 1,000 feet away as he was ripped to shreds and the water bubbled with his blood. This was one of the more brutal shark attacks in recent memory. Ian had his left arm ripped off and his left leg bitten off above the knee. His new wife stood by and watched as the life slowly drained from her new husband's eyes. At 27 years old, Gemma was made a widow and had to bring the body of her dead husband back home to England. And the worst part of it all is that it never would have happened if they had just listened to the advice of the people who literally live there. Number 2. The volcano honeymoon. Lauren and Matthew Urey took their honeymoon on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. They were among a handful of passengers who thought it would be fun to explore the popular tourist site of White Island, a small volcanic piece of land near the mainland of New Zealand. Normally, this is a fun stopping point where tourists can get out and explore a real volcano without really being in any danger. But on this day, the danger was real. The eruption occurred at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just minutes after the passengers had gotten too close to the mouth of the volcano. And it was pandemonium. The eruption was instantaneous, and at least 5 people were killed in the immediate blast, while many others were injured. Lauren and Matthew were among the injured, with both of them suffering from severe burns and being rushed to the closest hospital. In the end, 23 people were rescued from the volcanic island by the police, with a handful of others remaining missing and presumed dead. Lauren and Matthew healed from their burns in the hospital and then went back home to America, traumatized by what they felt was the worst honeymoon ever. Number 1. Trouble in the Maldives. A British couple were on their honeymoon in the Maldives when they suffered a tragic accident. Jonathan and Emma Gray from West Yorkshire were discovered injured on the side of the road near Kurdu Island Resort and Spa, where they had been staying. Jonathan was in his early 20s, his wife was 25, and they had apparently crashed while driving a quad bike. A third victim was found at the scene but later recovered in the hospital. Jonathan and Emma were not so lucky. They died from their injuries, which is honestly the worst ending to any honeymoon. The authorities didn't even say what exactly happened with the crash, but obviously whoever was driving the quad lost control and everyone was thrown from the vehicle. They must have been going too fast if both honeymooners were injured so badly that they died. What kind of honeymoon horror have you experienced? Hopefully none, but let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more great stuff. We'll see you next time.